Welcome to Real Rockford Files, for tales of the paranormal, supernatural, and the flat-out unbelievable. Today I'll be sharing ghost stories from Wisconsin. Let's get into it. Story 1. My basement has always given me a feeling of fright, so sleeping down there was never an option for me until there was no other option. For context, I always felt watched when down there. There was always an intense feeling of not being alone despite knowing no one else was with me. Well, no one else alive or breathing was with me. For many years I avoided the basement. I would only go if at least 2 others would be with me. I was the type of kid to zoom back up the stairs real fast. I still get the feeling of something being behind me as I go back up. Currently, I only go into the basement to grab frozen food or to do my laundry. The feeling I've always gotten down there has never left me though. This story takes place in July 2018. I was 12 when it happened. It was a hot summer that year. The air was very humid and it felt sweltering outside. The air conditioner in our home had recently stopped working, and the house had started to become unbearably hot. The only spot in the house that was cold was the basement, so that is where we had to sleep for a few days. The first few nights were fine, nothing happened at all until the night before the air conditioner was fixed. That night I was struggling to sleep. I felt so uncomfortable for absolutely no reason. I just brushed it off as most 12-year-olds would. I went to bed at 12ish that night. After what felt like seconds, I awoke abruptly. I remember sitting up and looking towards the small space under the stairs that led into a storage room. I saw a figure slowly gliding towards me from the stair space. I don't remember exactly how this figure looked, but I remember it being black, solid, and its shape reminded me of a blob. I remember closing my eyes after that, but that's all I can remember of that one. I assume I had fallen back to sleep. Once again, I wake up abruptly after what felt like minutes of sleep. This time, instead of looking at the darkest spot, I looked at the laundry room entryway. I thought if I looked towards the most lit up area, then I wouldn't see anything scary. Thinking about it now, I don't see it as scary, but younger me sure did. Instead of seeing an empty doorway, I saw another blob-like figure. It was almost like the last one, except this one was pure white and had black spots for eyes. It was solid white. You couldn't see through it. No light seemed to pass through it either, but it didn't have a shadow. Like the last one, it seemed to glide towards me. Before it could get even 6 feet away from me, I hid under my blanket. I fell asleep almost instantly after. I slept the rest of the night. The next morning, I grabbed all my stuff and headed upstairs. Ever since then, I have not slept in the basement. Story 2. So this happened when I was about 15 years old, I believe. For years, actually, as long as I can remember, I could hear voices when I listened. If you don't know what I mean by that, you probably can't understand, but I call it Channel 1 and Channel 2. Channel 1 is the normal way you hear things. Channel 2 is the other way. Sorry if you don't understand what I mean by that. I'm not an expert enough in this stuff to explain or even defend it as a real thing. I have no idea how it works, but in Channel 2 you can hear all kinds of things. Voices, music, moaning, laughing. It all sort of depends on what is in the air around you at the time. Some locations are thick with it, some aren't, but it's all there in the wind. That's when I hear it best, anyway. At night, though, when the wind is blowing, mostly it's just voices. Not a single voice, but distant babble, hard to ignore, because it gets louder if you listen close, and it's hard not to listen in the dark. Worse, if you listen too close in the wrong place on the wrong night, other things start happening. Mostly at night, but not always, as in this story. This happened in broad daylight. I was laying in bed at my brother's place. It was a small apartment on Mather Street he shared with my cousin near the Fox River in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I crashed there sometimes. Well, this particular day, the voices were very loud and I was very tired because I had been up all night, but I couldn't fall asleep because the voices kept getting louder beneath me until it felt as if the bed was shaking underneath me. Now, that might seem terrifying at first glance, but it had happened before, and I had then, and still have, a simple rule about weird stuff. If someone else didn't see it, feel it, or hear it, then it isn't real. Zero exceptions. So the wind is blowing outside, and I'm trying to sleep. And for almost an hour, I tried to ignore the hallucination keeping me awake until, tired and frustrated, I got out of bed and went into the living room where my cousin Todd was talking to a couple of girls who lived nearby and were over for friendly flirting or whatever. I asked if Todd would come talk to me for a minute in the bedroom. He agreed and followed me into the room, where I shut the door behind him. "What's up?" Todd asked, and I asked him to sit down on the bed a second, and that's about as long as he did sit down before he jumped up like something bit him and started cursing and staring at the bed. Cutting into the story a second, another of my little rules regarding weird stuff is that I never tell someone with me what it is I see or hear. I ask what the person with me sees or hears, so I know they actually do see or hear whatever it is I think I see or hear. Sorry if that seems a sort of burdensome, but it's the only way I can really know for sure they are being honest with me. I have trust issues, possibly. "The bed is effing shaking," Todd said, at which point, feeling entirely vindicated, I pumped my fist and said, "I effing knew it. I knew it." Then we swore a lot more. We were both teenagers and thought that made us adults, I suppose. And the bed eventually stopped shaking, and I felt very pleased with myself, and Todd decided the house was haunted, or more likely I was haunted. But that didn't ruin my mood because this had been going on for years, and hooray, I wasn't crazy. And then it started to get dark. I realized all those nights I heard voices and the bed was shaking might not have been hallucinations. I started wishing I hadn't had Todd come sit on the bed. Story 3. In 1986, my parents purchased and moved into a house. It was an older home and had been inhabited before. I've heard that during the 1970s, it was owned by the boys' basketball coach from the local high school. Supposedly, he was a predator and was fired for making advances towards his team members. This is unsubstantiated. I was born in 1988 and lived there until we moved to another house across town in early 2004. I was 15 and a half at the time. During my childhood, I experienced a variety of troubling phenomena and was very well troubled as a result. I constantly felt as if I was being watched, followed, and having my thoughts read. I also felt that something was listening to me when I spoke. As a result, I was always afraid and could never be left alone. I was always running up and down stairs, looking behind me and looking over my shoulder. There was also visual and auditory phenomena. Often out of the corner of my eye, I saw shadow figures darting through rooms and then disappearing. One night in the summer of 1998, I heard guttural laughter emanating from the far corner of my room. It seemed to echo and multiply itself before eventually fading and ending. In early 2003, I heard a few tortured-sounding voices calling my name, again in my bedroom. The phenomenon was the most intense in the upstairs, my bedroom, and in the back room of the basement. It seemed to decline and eventually end as I entered puberty. At the time, both my parents were staunch evangelical Christians who believed firmly in the existence of spirits. Oddly enough, however, my father did not take me seriously and dismissed it as a form of separation anxiety. As a result, he took no action on my behalf. In hindsight, I should have been taken to a therapist to determine if this was simply a product of my mind, and if so, why was my mind producing it? If it was not, they should have consulted a religious official to have the house examined and, if needed be, cleansed. Alas, he did neither. In fact, it didn't even occur to him to do either, and I lived in a torment as a result. His lame Band-Aid solution was to stay up with me until I fall asleep. I was discussing this with my mother recently, and what she said surprised me. She conceded to me that she too had experienced exactly the same phenomena. However, she began to feel it when they first moved in 1986, and for her it lasted until we moved in early 2004. Basically, the entire time she lived in the house. She even discussed it with my father. For his part, he maintains he never experienced anything out of the ordinary there, except for a vague sensation of darkness once in the back of the basement. This has left me with nothing but questions. Was there a connection between the activities of the previous inhabitant and what I experienced? Why, despite my parents' religious faith, were the entities capable of entering our home and afflicting us? Why did my mother and I experience it, but not my father? Why was my father so passive and complacent in dealing with it? I would love an answer to any of these questions. Story 4. Alright, so I'm not sure where to start, so I'll begin with a little background on my story. This was in 2012 in Rothschild, Wisconsin. I had found out that the original idea for the movie Poltergeist was based on a house a block over from mine. It explained a lot of phenomena that happened in my home. So my stepfather is diagnosed with brain cancer. My family and I are looking for a house. We come upon a house in a nice neighborhood for a steal. It is a $1,200 a month for a 4-bed, 3-bath home with everything you could want. It was built recently and just massive. I have only been there a little while and weird things happen, like my stuff going missing, stuff turning on and off, and sounds of movement from different areas of the house. I had 2 siblings, so I paid very little attention to it. Well, on this night I was home alone at 15 years old. I had my earphones in and was doing homework when a black figure came crawling at me from my peripheral. It gave me a heart attack, and I tell my black lab, Jake, that he's an ass. Well, lo and behold, my dog is with my parents. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and I'm in the kitchen making myself a sandwich when I hear something burrowing down the stairs. I turn around, and it rounds the corner from the stairs leading upstairs, and there is what I can only describe as an oil-black, deformed spider man with no face. As soon as I made eye contact with it, it crawled at me with such swiftness that I couldn't react. And not going to lie, guys, I peed myself. I called my best friend crying and waited outside until she picked me up. A few days later, I found out about this part of town being on a Native American burial ground. So fast forward a few more weeks, and I'm sitting in the living room, and I got this feeling of just dread, sadness, and defeat. And once again, I hear something running upstairs from the basement. This time, this thing didn't stop to look at me. It just ran at me, and I panicked. I didn't know what to do. The thing would be on top of me within 3 seconds. I finally told my mom that although my stepfather having cancer and needing treatment that is out of town, that she couldn't leave me alone home anymore. I felt safer even if I had someone with me, even my little siblings. Me being a person who liked being alone, she didn't understand why. I finally told her, thinking she would think I was crazy. Her eyes widened. I asked her what was wrong. Her response, "I've been seeing the same thing, Gabby, and I don't know what to do." I had never seen her so fearful. Things just became worse. I haven't been able to find anything on this creature, so if anyone knows anything, please comment for me. My mom moved us out of the house shortly after when my sister claimed to be pushed down the stairs and my stepfather's cancer started progressing quickly. I tried to put as much detail into this as possible, but I am very terrified and started having nightmares of this thing again. Story 5. When I was about 4 years old, we moved into a big old house on a retired farm near Elk Mound, Wisconsin. We called it the Fisher Farm, since that was the name of the landlord. Likely because I was so small, the house seemed gigantic. It was a 2-story home with a full attic and basement, a nice sunroom, a wide open oak staircase, and large bay windows, but it only had 1 bathroom, which was upstairs. With the house being that large, and winters in Wisconsin being so brutally cold, it was a challenge for my parents to heat it. My father bought a space heater, and all 6 of us slept in the toy room off from the kitchen during cold snaps in winter. During one of these cold snaps, I had to go to the bathroom in the dead of night. My mom told my oldest sister, we'll call her Sophie, not her real name, to take me. She was slow to wake up, but I really had to go. Without turning on any lights, I went into the kitchen and through the swinging door to the dining room, but was stopped short when I saw a woman standing on the landing of the staircase. She was garbed in a long white dressing gown or robe with a matching nightcap, which resembled today's shower cap, only was made of cottony material. She had a long brunette braid resting over her left shoulder, while holding a candle which illuminated her features. She was very pretty, probably in her early 30s. I think I could probably draw her if I tried. She didn't smile or talk. She just stood there looking at me. I wasn't as frightened as I was intrigued. I knew she wasn't supposed to be there, but there she was. I presume I didn't know I was supposed to be scared. The most I knew about ghosts I learned from Saturday morning's Great Dane Scooby-Doo. Of course, those meddling kids always debunked those ghosts and monsters. They never had a woman standing on a staircase in their home in the middle of the night. I don't know how long I stood and looked at her, but I really wanted Sophie to see her. I turned to go back and hurry up, but she came through the swinging door and the lady was gone. I wonder now if the lady showed herself to me because I was about to ascend the long stairway in the dark, and she was, after all, carrying a candle. We only lived there a few years, but I had other experiences in that time. I would hear people talking, laughing, and whispering in the night. I would hear footsteps on the main floor from my bed upstairs that sounded like boots on the hardwood floors. I tried rationalizing it and told myself John Wayne was down there. One morning I woke to see a small man with curly gray hair standing at the foot of my bed. I was scared of the shadow on the wall in one of the bedrooms that looked like a man's side profile. Mom said it was where the paint had run. She ended up putting a dresser in front of the shadow/stain. She had also been spooked in the house on several occasions. One night while she was there alone, she heard a pile of pipes fall to the floor from the bedroom above her. My uncle stayed one night in the house and never stayed again. Several years after we moved, I met a guy in school who was living in the house at the time. He was a class clown, always smiling and being funny. I asked him if weird stuff ever happened in his house. He looked at me without a smile and told me in all seriousness that a lot of weird stuff happened there. I don't remember everything he told me, but he did say they were unable to get the stain off the bedroom wall until they painted it. I never understood why I was the one who had so many paranormal experiences on the Fisher farm. I didn't have any similar experiences after moving from there until I was a teenager. In my 40s, I met a lady who was something of a medium or psychic. I'm not sure what her title is, but she has certain abilities. When she first met me, she told me straightforwardly I was sensitive. The older I get, the more that seems to be true. I don't talk about it with my family so much as they would tell me I'm crazy. Seeing the woman on the stairway happened about 48 years ago. The house is still standing, looking like a charming country home. I wish I knew who owns it today. I'd like to walk through it and talk to people. I never learned the history of the house, but I'd like to research it. It's probably over 100 years old. Before Halloween each year, my friend and I take personal ghost tour of reportedly haunted places in our area. It's about a 6-mile to 60-mile drive. I have the Fisher farm on it. When we went last week, I could see the very spot through the big bay window where I saw that lady. Of course, she wasn't there, but I wonder if anybody else in the last 48 years has seen her.